The start of chapter 1100 sets up a clear dynamic: Kizaru on the right, Vegapunk on the left. Kizaru is taking up much more space on the page, matching how the world government side has the control and the dominance in the situation. It's also matched by how down below, all of the Marines are again facing to the left from the right. The conversation that takes up the first part of this chapter is defined by such dynamics. We aren't just keeping the sides consistent to make it easier to follow. Who is facing who is part of the story on every page. It's clever how this panel obscures Kuma's position, not just with careful framing and tight shots on Vegapunk's side, but even with a speech bubble literally blocking where Kuma is. It's keeping up a little bit of tension, giving us the question of whether or not Kizaru knows that Kuma is there, that it can then answer on the next page. Kuma's position in this panel is key. He is between Vegapunk and Saturn Snail, because he is the pawn on the game board, the piece they are fighting over. He is, in a literal sense, what is at stake. We are still keeping it to left and right, but Saturn has taken the primary role in facing Vegapunk, while Kizaru is taking a backseat and can thus face and lean away. As Saturn brings in his proposal to make Kuma a warlord, Kuma is now the one under attack, so we switch to him instead of Vegapunk on the left, with a close-up that puts the focus on Kuma's internal conflict. It's on the next page that the dynamic starts to shift. Even before Kuma states it out loud, we know he is considering the option because he has swung over to the right. And in the next wide panel, he is on the Marines' side, against Vegapunk, matching how Vegapunk is protesting something that Kuma has already accepted. It conveys all of this without even requiring dialogue from him or using many close-ups of his expression. Vegapunk continues to protest, dominating his panels and taking up space to the point that the reader can forget Kuma is there, that it's about him, just as Vegapunk himself is forgetting. And yet now Kuma is on the left again. Has he come back around to Vegapunk's side? No. We are reframing what the sides even are, and even putting Vegapunk on the side with Kizaru and Saturn, because what Kuma cares about is something that even Vegapunk is forgetting. It's about Bonnie. His care for Bonnie is so powerful that for a moment, there aren't sides. For a moment, the weight of his emotion can dominate the page, and the other three aren't framed against him, but are simply watching and realizing the depth of his feeling. For a moment, we can reject the conflict that defined the pages before and embrace love instead. The paneling in this conversation isn't complicated. Paneling doesn't need to be complicated or in-your-face impressive. It needs to convey the story well, to make what's happening clear, and to enhance the emotions we're meant to feel even if we don't realize why it's happening. There are a few neat things in the middle of the chapter. The parallel shots of Kuma and Bonnie receiving their treatments are great. And the row beneath it is a nice example of how even in simple panels, you want to give the eye an interesting route to follow. From Kuma's eyes to Sentomaru, to the tilted angle on Bonnie, then to the lab equipment and Kuma's body pointing upwards, our eye dips down and then rises back up. We see the same thing twice on the next page, going down with Bonnie's gaze and up towards Pythagoras. And there's even a curve to follow in the shapes of the pizza. If you're gonna make an eye go across a page, you might as well make it happen in an interesting way. I think we all adored the final section of the chapter. Getting to see all of these characters again was a treat. And as usual, Oda has more tricks up his sleeve to make sequences like this readable despite jumping around so much. The eye follows a tilted line down with Kuma's newspaper article, going from Sugar to Doflamingo. Crossing down to the next row, it follows the line of shadows on Doflamingo's face, then goes up with his glasses towards Robin. Robin's gaze directs the eye down to the newspaper, which then points us back up towards Crocodile, whose arm and coat then send us down towards Mihawk, which happens to be perfectly aligned with the direction Mihawk is looking in. And then as it jumps back over, the eye goes down with Alvida and Kobe's gaze. There's more of the same on the next page. A tilted angle helps the eye go across with Ace's gaze, before going down with Jinbei's. Then up and around from Hancock's gaze to Nyan's. It then curves around nicely with Perona's ghost, back up to Perona, which sends us back towards Dragon, who's then looking down for her eye to go down across Sabo's hat and head, and then down with his eyes to the newspaper. Now, this kind of thing doesn't mean your eye has to follow this exact order literally. Of course not. Speech bubbles are always slowing us down and getting in the way for one thing, but a page with directionality like this underlying its structure is always going to feel more natural and interesting to read than a page that hasn't taken these things into account. Going across the page with a curving, interesting shape like this is a lot more interesting than if the only way it knew how to direct her eye was like this this, and then like this, and then like this. But what I really like is Oda's careful choices in what to show. Some of these panels are admittedly a bit standard, like Crocodile just talking to Robin, but a lot of these serve to remind us exactly what each character's whole deal was in a visual and active way. Doflamingo has his anger emphasized, Crocodile has his scheming emphasized, Mihawk has the destruction he causes and his own calmness as he does it emphasized, and Alvida has her bullying and her conceitedness emphasized. My favorite example though, and my favorite panel in the chapter, is how Ace and Whitebeard's crew get a much wider panel, not focused on just one or two characters, but showing them as a group, because it's reminding us that their crew is a unit, a family, and while Ace is looking towards his family, Hancock is looking away from Neon as she always ignores her advice and her responsibilities. And Moria is of course laying back, completely indolent and passive. Finally, Dragon matches his own nature by how he's not doing anything here. Nah, I'm just kidding, I think people give Dragon too much criticism for that. Be patient. Most of these things are simple, but think of it this way. If we're going to flash around to characters we haven't seen in a while, are we going to just show them existing, or are we going to make a point of showing who they are? Because if we're going to show them at all, we might as well. Doflamingo needed to have a close-up because his internal anger is what's important about him, while Crocodile needed a wider shot to show that he's thinking of plans on a larger scale. The tricks in the final page are also simple but powerful. We are making so much use of direction this chapter. Right to left is usually forward in manga, and that's why it's the direction that Kuma is going in. He is acting, he is decisive, he is committing to what he must do. And yet in each panel, Kuma is looking back at his past, at who he is leaving behind, at who he loves. For no matter what happens, he won't forget them. I thought there was nothing to the final 2 pages, but I realized something they're doing as well. Kuma is going to the left, and Luffy is going to the right. The end of the chapter is therefore telling us that these 2 characters are on a crash course. There is a good chance that next chapter we see them meet. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. I make videos about One Piece's paneling every week, so subscribe if you want to see more of them. Feel free to comment about anything you thought was cool about this chapter's paneling, or what past chapters you want me to review on a break week. Or just comment which cameo from the chapter was your favorite. And if you think you're never going to forget about Kuma, then leave a like. See y'all next week.